How many hours do you work, Eric?
60 hours a week.
60 hours a week. And how many hours do you work at home?
The same. More. All day, all night.
Really? And then you woke up and realised you were dreaming, you mean?
Well, my day doesn't end sometimes.
What do you mean your day don't end? It don't bloody begin. You spent time on the phone.
This moment right here is uncomfortable to watch for a number of reasons. Because what's happening is not an assumption. It's being called out directly. This man is working 60 hours a week, carrying the weight of provision, showing up day after day. And what's being revealed is that while he's carrying that load, something very different is happening at home. Not because she, his wife, is a bad wife, but because somewhere along the way, awareness got lost. And now it's finally being confronted. What you're seeing here is what happens when truth shows up and there's nowhere left to hide. This is the dilemma. This is what is now being confronted as you're seeing. The question is, though, is this enough? Will this be enough? Well, let us watch and see if it is.
You spent time just walking around the house, up and down. You spent time walking back and forth from a dining table with your kids. I don't know what you do with your hours. But I tell you one thing as a woman, if my husband's working, I do want to make sure that I'm doing what I should be doing at home.
This is the first time she becomes emotional. And that's what was pointed out, right? Not because she's being attacked, but because she's being seen clearly, right? Because when awareness finally breaks through, emotion follows. And most couples never get to see this moment or experience this moment. And sometimes it's because of what has been happening for so long in this relationship. Not because the problem isn't there, but because people or most couples don't slow down, right? One or both don't slow down long enough to look at what's happening honestly. When that's confronted, when that's brought to the surface, things happen. Things happen? Well, let's see.
And if now I'm making you think about that, because this is the first time I've seen you become emotional, because it's the first time you've even had to sit and think about your actions. You're right.
What's being revealed, right? So what we have here is interesting. Yes, it's uncomfortable to watch at the very beginning, and things began to unfold, and many times the story of what we're seeing and hearing could go a certain direction. But sometimes it needs to go the opposite direction. I wonder what happens if this conversation was taken out of the setting and this wife was being asked about her time at home and the work she does from home, because I do believe that wives who stay home, they are working from home. It's just really a different location. But I wonder if this is not the story she tells her family and her friends to justify. She's equally working as hard as her husband. And granted, sometimes it is sometimes. But what's being revealed here is how her time is actually being spent on the phone, moving around the house. And that's not a judgment. It's really what's being pointed out to show that her argument may not be enough, right? Not fully engaged. And for the first time, she's been asked to look at it honestly. Honestly. Honestly? Yeah. So let me kind of pause here for a second and throw this your way, because I have seen similar dances like this or dynamics like this over the last 2 decades, right? I've been working in this field as a licensed marriage and family therapist for 20 plus years. And I can tell you, I've seen this similar situation where this kind of comparison and justification and argument and fights over who does what, when the bigger story, the bigger message is being lost. Having been married myself for 40 plus years since 1985, and part of that time was my wife did stay at home to take care of our young children. While I was working outside the home, she worked inside the home. And I'm not here to try to somehow compare, but I can tell you the dynamic shifts in those moments. But I can tell you that, thank God, we had a basically an understanding of what that means and what that should look like. And we never had to experience something like this. But not because we never did doesn't mean we haven't had our moments, different kind of moments, because no relationship, no marriage is perfect. We all have our issues. We all have our moments, right? See, what I do know is that whenever something like this is brought up, something tends to happen, especially if someone is sensitive to this issue, right? Maybe as you're watching this is you. You felt it, that quiet sigh. Maybe that rolling of the eyes, here we go again. Another message telling me what I'm doing wrong. And maybe even, but you don't understand my husband, could be what you're thinking. What I do for many reasons, right? One of those, I'm a man, a husband like yours, a driven, provider-minded husband, one who works outside the home per se, or have worked outside the home. Now my office is in the home, but still is considered working outside the home. One who possibly have had where his wife, as I mentioned a few moments ago, worked from home. So I think there's some things I do understand, right? And I've heard, as I mentioned, this dynamic, these things being presented. So if you're feeling alone, like you're carrying too much, trying and not getting much back, hear me, please hear me clearly. This is not about dismissing your pain. It is about what you do with it in moments like this. Because right now, you're standing possibly in a fork in the road. Like this wife, she's now at a fork in the road. What will she now do, having been confronted? Well, she have options. She could continue. And here's what I do know. If nothing changes, nothing changes. So she could continue fighting for who's right and what she does compared to her husband. She could continue that. But I can tell you, her husband, what will happen? He's going to act a certain way to, in a sense, show his displeasure, show his what he's not appreciating. So you can show up in the same way, reacting, pointing things out, arguing, hoping he'll finally change. And slowly this distance you feel, it grows, right? That quiet frustration turns into silent divorce. Or you can pause long enough to ask, is it possible that part of what's happening in my own relationship, my marriage, includes how I'm showing up? Now, not all of it, of course, right? But part of it. And this is where I want to give you something simple. One of the things I teach are frameworks. And one of the frameworks I do teach in moments like this, if you're having that experience or emotionally reacting, is notice it. So I call it nip it. Nip it in the bud, right? Notice it. N is for nip. N is for notice. Notice what's happening. How are you feeling? What's going on within you right now? And then once you have noticed that, you're aware of what's happening, you take the I is inhale and inspect. Inhale and inspect it. And after you've done that, park it. Park it means maybe you might need to pray about it. Maybe you might need to pivot away from what it is you're thinking is happening. Because if you don't interrupt the reaction, the pattern keeps running your marriage the way it is. So let me kind of bring you then, dear wife, into a moment you don't see. Maybe this is your husband, or think of your husband in this. If he's not him, as I'm about to describe, but think of a husband like this, and you can replace this idea of your husband pulling up in the driveway. Replace that with anything else. Him working long hours, basically going to the gym after work, hanging out with the boys after work. You replace it with whatever your situation might be. But let me use the idea of a husband who pulls up in his driveway. He just sits there. Not because he doesn't love you, but because he's trying to settle himself before he walks into the house. His body is carrying the weight of the day, and his mind is already asking, what kind of mood am I walking into? He steps through the door, and without saying a word, he's reading everything. Your face, your tone, the atmosphere in the room. And if he senses tension, dear wife, his stress rises. It rises again. So what does he do? He gets quiet, right? Walks away carefully. It's measured, not because he doesn't care. And I know sometimes it's misinterpreted. He's been out all day. He comes home. He acts that way. Could it be that he is protecting what's left of the marriage? Could it be that he's trying to avoid a conflict? Could it be that he's trying to decompress? But because he's also could be trying not to get it wrong. Get it wrong? Yeah. This is where it breaks down sometimes, because you see his silence and think, what's wrong with you? But what you don't see is he's not shutting you down or shutting down on you. He's trying not to fail in front of you. I know that's maybe hard to imagine, but you might want to consider this. Because when he hears frustration, he doesn't just hear words. He hears, I'm not doing enough. I'm not appreciated. I'm failing here too. And when a man feels that, he doesn't move closer, right? He pulls back. This is what's happening in this dynamic as you're seeing here. I know it's not enough that was shown, but I want you to use your imagination and put yourself in that situation. So let me just say this very clearly also, that you don't come here, right? You didn't come here just to talk about what he's doing wrong. You're here, dear wife, because something in your marriage needs to change. And right now, you're the one willing to do something about it. That's not blame. That's influence. And influence is where change begins. You're a change agent. So let me get to give you one simple path or one simple shift, if I can. And before I give that to you, let me just say, if you have not yet subscribed to the channel, would you go ahead and do so right now? I would appreciate that, because that way you get all the videos that's coming up. So I want to give you one simple shift, and before you point out what's missing, acknowledge what he's carrying. Start with acknowledgement. Let him see, let him feel seen before you ask to be understood. I know this might be stepping on some toes, and you say, wait a minute, what about me? I get it. Dear wife, I'm saying you are an influencer. You have more power than you do. I call it your superpower. So I'm empowering you. So let him feel seen before you ask to be understood. That alone can change how he walks through that door. And so, dear wife, if you're still, sitting there thinking, okay, I see this, but what do I actually say? Well, I'm glad you're asking that question, because that tells me one thing. You're willing to start at least here. So I've created for you a guide, basically a conversation guide. It's called 7 Simple Conversations to Rebuild Closeness, right? Simple, practical ways to talk to your husband without pushing him away, but actually drawing him closer. So you'll find the link in the description below, but also here on the screen, buildyourhappiermarriage.com/closeness. You can get your free copy, free for the asking. So as I kind of winding down here, I want to say this very important thing. You're not wrong for wanting closeness to your wife, but the way you've been trying, maybe creating the distance you feel, now you see it. So I want you to remember this. You're not powerless in your marriage. You're not. You actually are one connection skill away from the marriage you've been praying for. And if you are now realizing, no one has ever explained my husband like this, then you'll want to make sure you stay close to this channel, and again, hit that subscribe button and share this video with at least one other wife. And you want to watch this video right here that's coming up, because it will also help you in continuing to hear more about how you can close the gap in your relationship with your husband. Now may God bless you, and thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next video. God bless.